Hello, welcome everybody to another Clown-versation this Friday, December 9th. It's a snowy day where I am. What is it like where you are? I hope you're having an awesome day. Welcome. I am Barnaby from Clown Spirit, where we take the power of clowning and we use it to bring lightness, joy, and connection to your life and the lives of everybody around you. And today I'm going to be talking with the amazing Daniel Stein. So, if you're a lover of clown, or even if you're not and you're just curious about what clown is and you want to learn more about it, please stick around. You're in the right place.
It's just a conversation with a fellow clown. It's not very serious, we're clowning around. It's really just a clown-versation.
All right. Welcome to another Clown-versation, everybody. Today I'm with Daniel Stein. And before I introduce my amazing Clown-versation guest, I just want you all to check in and say hi. Will you say hi in the comments, in the chat? Tell me your name, where you're from, what you're doing today, what the weather's like, what your clown life is like, what's happening at the moment. Tell me everything. I want to know all about you, please. And also, while you're at it, please hit the subscribe button on my YouTube channel. That's Clown Spirit YouTube channel. And like the video, comment, share it with your friends. You know, we want to spread the love. We want to educate people and involve and include people and welcome people into this wonderful world of clowning. So also, I really want to let you know about a very cool event that is coming up soon. Every month, I have a special masterclass, which I call Clown X. And Clown X is basically experience, expertise. It's coming to you in your own living room every single month. It's an online masterclass with some of the best clown teachers from around the world. We had Jeff Johnson, and then last month we had Shannon Calcutt deliver an amazing masterclass. And next month we have the wonderful Robin Hambrook from the UK, who is an expert in clown activism. And she has this whole technique and whole curriculum called Rebel Clown Activism. And she's going to be giving the Clown X Masterclass on January the 4th. So in the comments below, I'm going to put the link to sign up to that. Don't miss it. It's going to be absolutely amazing. So I can see people are checking in and saying hi in the chat. We've got Solar Kim. Hi from Seoul. We've got somebody from Seoul, everybody. That is so cool. Excited to have you here. Peter Shub. Hi, Peter. So good to have you. Thanks for introducing me to Daniel and having this whole conversation happen today. Hi, Joanna Bassi. Lovely to have you. Hi, William from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Nick. Hi, Nick from sunny LA. Oh my goodness, so many people joining us today. It's lovely to have you. Now, please stay involved in this conversation. I know lots of you are going to have reactions, things you want to ask Daniel, things or your own stories that you want to contribute. So please feel free to just throw those into the comments. And remember, subscribe to the channel, like the video as much as you want to, and also share it with your friends. Why not do that? Before we start, I also am going to try a new thing today, folks. I am going to try this. Let's see if this works. I figured out how to do polls on YouTube Lives. Tell me if it comes through. I have just submitted or put out a poll for you all to find out where you mostly do your clowning. Do you do it mostly in theaters, in the circus, in healthcare and hospitals, or maybe in your everyday life? If that came through, I think it should be an opportunity just to check the box that most applies to you. So have a look, and I think at any point during this conversation, you can just go ahead and select. Yeah, I think it came through. So where do you do your clowning? Where do you mostly do your clowning? Maybe it's in multiple places. I'm not sure if you can check multiple options, but I'm super interested to know out of my audience, are you mostly a theater clown, a circus clown, a hospital clown? Or are you sort of just putting clown into practice in your everyday life? Or maybe it's none of the above, in which case just put into the chat where you do your clowning, because it only gave me 4 options. Okay, and we have some more people checking in now. Hello, everybody. Hi, Deb from Minnesota. Great to have you here. Jeff from Connecticut. Jeff Smithson. Hi, Jeff. Great to have you here. All right, so I think it is time to welcome my amazing guest, Daniel. I want to just say a little bit about Daniel before I bring him on, because he is a very, very esteemed person in our clown world. He studied, he studied with Etienne Decroux, his kind of like the master of corporeal mime. And we're going to be talking more about mime and what mime is with Daniel. He also worked as an actor with the French National Theatre. Must have been a very interesting experience. His solo performances have toured in more than 30 countries, as well as in theatres such as the Kennedy Center, the Lincoln Center in the United States. He's taught classes throughout the world at the Juilliard School of Drama, New York, in New York, the Institute of Dramatic Art in Tokyo. He's received grants, awards from all over the world. He's a John Simon Guggenheim Fellow. And more recently, since moving back to the States, for a long time, he was part of the faculty at Brown University at the Trinity Repertory Theatre MFA Professional Actor Training Program. And then, more recently than that, moved to become a senior lecturer at UC Santa Barbara in California, which we're going to hear about as well. So he has a long and illustrious career, as well as just being a favorite teacher and master of many, many people in our community. So please, it's a great privilege to welcome onto the Clown-versation stage, Mr. Daniel Stein. Hello.
It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this conversation with us, Daniel. It's awesome to meet you.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm in my backyard, so if the birds fly by, they have free range.
They have freedom to do so, the birds. You have to say, Daniel, that you have the most beautiful setting right now behind you. There is this. I mean, I'm not saying you're not beautiful as well. You are very beautiful.
I'm very old, is what I am. I see an image of an old man on the screen, and I look and I'm going, who the hell is that?
Well, I think I can compete for the gray hairs on the chin. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well in that department. No, it's lovely to meet you, Daniel, because I've just heard so much about you over the years, and I feel like the opportunities that you and I have had to meet have been many, but they've never quite happened. As I was saying to you just before we came on air, I almost went to Brown University and then ended up going to Northwestern. And so maybe would have, I don't know, made shows together, done stuff together.
That would have been fun. And life is long, hopefully, and we'll have a chance possibly to still connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're just down the coast in California. It's only like a 2-day drive.
Where are you located?
I'm in Hood River, Oregon, just outside Portland.
Oh gosh. Okay. Yeah. You're just down the road, up the road. I was much closer when I was at Del Arte. Del Arte is 90 minutes from the Oregon border, and I was there for 15 years.
Yes, exactly. And I'm hoping to talk about that in a moment. I just want to welcome a few more people who've joined. We have David, who's a long-time Clown Spirit fan. Hi, David from Winnipeg. Hillary from Boston. I'm entirely AWOL from this world, Hillary says. Here to catch a glimpse of my beloved teacher and friend. I assume that's Daniel, not me, because I don't think I know Hillary.
Hello, Hillary. And hello, Jihei in Seoul, South Korea. It's 2 a.m. in the morning for her.
Oh my goodness, that is some dedication.
That is. And Bill George is there, and Jeff Smithson. It's so cool that you folks have tuned in. I'm very flattered.
Yeah, it's all for you. Absolutely. I'm curious whether this poll thing is working that I tried to do. I can't really quite tell if it's working or not. I think it is. I think people are clicking on it. Chloe. Hi, Chloe Bank. My mum went to school with Daniel, and I met Daniel about 10 years ago during what I would call the Vietnam period of my life. Now I'm living in California, and I absolutely adore Daniel.
Well, and I was at Chloe's wedding. Oh, gosh. Is it a year and a half now?
Wow. That's so
Chloe's
cool.
a sweet, sweet, sweet human being and a nurse.
Congratulations, Chloe.
Young woman.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Daniel, now that we've kind of gotten to know each other and, you know, we're like old buddies, I often start these conversations by asking this question: how did you get into clowning in the first place? But I'm aware you didn't really, it took a while, like you went via mime and other things. So, you know, how would you answer that question? How did you get into clown?
Well, it's odd. You're going to be surprised perhaps by my answer. I'm highly dyslexic. And so school, I guess what most people think of their first training, was not a good experience for me. And I found theater, thank goodness, because I think I would be bagging groceries in some Walmart had I not found the theater.
You'd be a very entertaining grocery bagger, I'm sure.
Probably not, because I'd be so frustrated that I would probably be an angry old man. So I got into theater, and via theater, I could tell you all sorts of stories about the people who influenced me. Jewel Walker was one of them, and I found Jewel. Well, I first found Jewel on the Mr. Rogers Show when I was a little boy, and fast forward several years, Jewel Walker was a teacher of mine at Carnegie-Mellon, and he introduced me to first pantomime and then to corporeal mime, and then I went off to Paris to study with his teacher, Etienne Decroux. And from the corporeal mime world, of which I have to admit I was a snob for many years. Corporeal mime is a very snobby kind of place, much like Lecoq people who train Lecoq are very. Lecoq is.
I did Lecoq, you know.
Exactly, and well, people.
I did Lecoq, you know.
That sounds terribly risque that you did anybody, but and I did Decroux, and when I fell off that horse finally of my snobbiness, I realized that there was a lot in the world that Decroux did not cover, and that in fact Lecoq didn't cover, and those tentacles that went out into the rest of the world led me to clown. I'm not sure I have the right to call myself a clown, because I don't really teach clown that much. I dabble into it, but I do not consider myself an expert clown.
Well, we could argue about that.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Having a clown-versation, which I find very humbling, because in fact I have a great reverie for and great respect for clowns. They do something that is, at least in my perspective, they do something that is quite dangerous. It's very revealing. Clowns reveal a great deal about themselves that I'm not sure all the rest of the theater realizes. So I have a great fondness.
Peter's asking some really great questions here, which were on the tip of my tongue as well. How can the study of mime contribute to the world of clowning? So yeah, I really want to get into this question, Daniel. Like, what is the relationship between the two things in your view?
Delivery systems. Anyone who's ever studied with me, I talk a lot about delivery systems. How do things get from from a source to someone else. In the world of therapeutic medicine, there are delivery systems. In the world of buying and selling, there are delivery systems. And in the world of theater, there are many delivery systems. And what the world of mime gave me was a perspective on delivery systems. And so I think clown, if anybody's going to be useful in the world of theater, they need good delivery systems. And so I think Decroux gave me a formation in starting to discover more about how we get information from one source to another.
That's really, really wonderful answer. Thank you. So let's go into a little bit mime, because I think that, quite a lot of the audience listening today won't necessarily have even a basic understanding of really what corporeal mime is versus pantomime or other kinds of mime. So could you even just give us like the basic, your understanding of what corporeal mime involves?
Yeah, that's actually simpler than you might think. If take my glasses off for a second. If
nice.
So my head is here, and we have what's basically neutral. But as soon as I do this, there is a brand new discovery that your whole sense of who this is as compared to who this is radically different, because here I'm basically neutral, and here I am looking at the big picture. And if I do this, I'm looking at detail as compared to this. And if I do this, all of a sudden we have interrogation that has gotten into the picture. And if I do this, other is introduced. The whole idea that there is someone other than you. And that's corporeal mime at its very foundation. That those simple changes in my physicality make radical changes in your understanding of what you're looking at. That this Daniel Stein is different than this Daniel Stein is different than this one. And so that's corporeal mime in a nutshell.
Wow. I've never heard it expressed that way. That's super interesting.
Well, Decroux is very interested in not what the actor was feeling, but what the audience was feeling. And he thought that shape was the foundation of the information that the audience is receiving. And so the shape of Daniel changes as soon as it goes to here. And that's a radical change in direction of energy, if you will. And so the audience all of a sudden has a whole new perspective of what they're looking at, or who they're looking at, or why that person is doing whatever they're doing.
And it also sort of projects other realities into the world around you, isn't it? Sort of, it gestures to, like, if you're looking down, it implies a thing that you're looking at, the detail, or if you're looking up, it implies that bigger world that you're looking at, so that it conjures imaginative images for the audience.
Totally. Which is what theater is so good at. I make a pretty large distinction between literature and theater. And that I think a lot of people's notion of what theater is actually literary rather than theatrical. And I don't buy into that. I think literary theater is very wonderful, and I love, Shakespeare and Tom Stoppard. They're word crafts people. And the world of mime and the world of clown, as far as I'm concerned, is not word centric. It is image centric. And so we get into a whole other notion of why we're here. if we're here to hear a story, that's one thing. If we're here to watch something that changes our emotions, that's a whole different, we go to different places for different things. I go to the library to find a book, and I go to the grocery store to buy my my bread. And we go to the theater for one thing, or we go to the theater for another thing.
Yes, this is great. And I want to continue this discussion of theater and what theater is. I just want to remind people watching that if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel. I'm here talking with the amazing Daniel Stein. This is a Clown-versation, which we do every single Friday with all kinds of amazing people. Please like the video. Please comment and chat. Put your questions into the chat, and Daniel will answer them. In fact, we have a bunch of.
I can't see the chat.
Oh, there might be a button there that you can hit that will allow you to see it. But if not, I will just read them out, and I'll put the ones we're speaking of on the screen. Well, David says, Daniel, did you ever come to the International Mime Festival in Winnipeg?
Oh, many times. Giuseppe Candello used to run that festival, and Giuseppe's a dear friend. I haven't seen him in years and years, but yes, I went to that festival several times, and did both taught workshops and performed there. For many years, I wore a bathrobe that I bought when I was in Winnipeg. It was one of the coldest places I've ever been in my life. It was incredibly cold, but what a wonderful festival. It used to take place at the gas station. Wow. Giuseppe had transformed what had been literally a gas station into a wonderful theater and a beautiful center of culture. And he invited people from all over the world. I have very fond memories of Winnipeg.
Very cool. I didn't ever go to that theater, but I went to Winnipeg for the Fringe Festival once, and it was the opposite. It was hot. It was the middle of August, and it was super hot. And I was performing in basically what was converted pub, and there was no air conditioning, and it was the hardest show I think I've ever done. I was doing my solo clown show. It's like super physical, climbing on top of a piano for an hour. And I had to do it every night for 12 nights, and I thought I was going to die every time.
It's so funny because the venues that have become theaters, in London, I worked at the Cockpit Theater, which in fact was a cockfighting venue in the old days. And in Milan, Italy, I performed in what during the day was a porn movie theater, and during the evenings was an art house for both film and live theater. It was, and then it would transform back into and in fact, my agent set me up. I was living while I was there in Milan. I was living at a brothel. For real,
Milan's.
Yes, I was living in a brothel because that's where my agent found a cheap room for me to stay in. That's crazy.
You must have some interesting stories of all your travels around the world.
I'm trying to write them down in a book right now.
Oh, please. Yes. Well, let us know when you're finished and we'll promote it here on the...
Well, let me know when I'm finished.
Okay. Come on. Crack the whip.
Yeah. I have a new person who's helping me write it. There's a young woman who I just helped devise her master's thesis at the Pratt Institute. And I'm, in fact, going to be visiting with her in a couple of weeks during my break here to work on the book a little bit and work on the continuation of her thesis material.
Fabulous. Yeah. Drew Richardson says, if I remember correctly, I've seen Daniel chased by a clown nose on stage. Speaking of clown.
It's nice to hear from you, Drew. As soon as you said Drew's name, a picture of his face popped up into my face. Yes, I do a show called Windowspeak that I devised with Fred Kerchek. Fred Kerchek was my director in that play, and there is a moment when, in fact, a red nose is chasing me across the edge of a wall. So,
and what's the meaning of that? What's the sort of function of that moment in the?
Actually, it's a full-length evening play called Windowspeak, and it looks at, oddly enough, the cultural references of architecture. That a French window opens in towards itself and has a grate in front of it, that an American window is a guillotine, and that a Japanese window is a shoji screen that opens, and when it closes, you can't see through it, but light comes through it. And I've lived in all three of those places for extended periods of time. And so the play looks at those cultures, and above the American window at one point, this clown nose shows its presence, and it becomes both a perspective of fascination for me, the actor, but also a perspective of fascination for the audience, because it's immediately recognized. The one thing that a clown nose has is instant recognizability. That I loved your little song with the ukulele, and as soon as the image comes up, that red nose becomes iconic. And so I use the iconicism, if that's even a word, of the red nose as a juxtaposition to this young man. I guess the play was made by a young man. Now it's performed by an old man, and he is being chased by the clown. So it's all metaphor.
Yeah.
All of my work is highly based in metaphor. I did pantomime for a while, and pantomime is not metaphorical, oddly enough. It's very, in fact, it's the exact opposite. It's the archetype of thing as compared to the archetype of idea.
That's so interesting. So I was going to ask you about that. Can you clarify a little bit more? What is the difference between pantomime and corporeal mime?
Well, pantomime, if I take my coffee cup, where's my coffee cup? There's my coffee cup. My hand is around my coffee cup. And if I take the coffee cup out, I now have the negative mold of the coffee cup. And I manipulate that negative mold in order to tell a story. So without the things in pantomime, be it the wind or a coffee cup or a banana, we don't really have much of a story yet. And in corporeal mime, we don't so much tell a story as introduce the audience to a roller coaster of emotional change. And so it's funny. I'm sure most of the audience knows the story of Romeo and Juliet, and yet they would go to see Romeo and Juliet, and it becomes apparent that they obviously don't go to hear the story. Because they know the story. They go for the delivery system of a story that they already understand. And corporeal mime decides to, as Decroux would put it, do a portrait of the portrait. If you will, the story is the reality. The play about the story is a portrait of the reality. And Decroux decided to distance it yet one more notch by doing a portrait of the portrait. So you have the reality, the portrait, and then the portrait of the portrait. And in each rendition, you get further and further away from the minutia of the detail, and you get closer and closer to the root source of the emotional content that if you want to distill Romeo and Juliet, it gets distilled down. You take everything away and you still have two young people who fall in love with one another. And for whatever reason, they can't get together. And so corporeal mime would look at that rather than you got the Capulets and you got the, and all of those other things that this dyslexic brain has a great deal of trouble following. And so I was immediately attracted to the fact that Decroux wasn't looking at the detail that I found so confusing. He was looking at, as Emily Dickinson would say, the attar of the rose, the tiny bit of juice in the rose that makes it smell so amazingly delicious. And that attar is sort of the zenith of emotional trigger. And so the audience is treated to an emotional roller coaster, if you will, rather than a series of narrative detail. And I think Clown goes right to that same thing.
I was going to ask you how would Clown then treat Romeo and Juliet? What would Clown be interested in?
It would be interested in the fact that all along the way, there are these accidents. I think what Clown does so wonderful is interrogate the accident, the thing that wasn't supposed to happen. And what was not supposed to happen was, at the very end, for example, is she doesn't wake up at the right time. And so Romeo is there with this, he thinks that his lover is dead. And it's both a terrible tragedy, but a wonderful moment for comedy, because there he is, his love is right in front of him, but she's unresponsive. And that's just, it's the very crux of where Clown would start digging. And yes, it would be irreverent, and yes, it would be very dark, but it could give source to great humor.
Yeah, I saw a wonderful Spy Monkey production of, I think it was called All the Deaths in Shakespeare. I can't remember what the exact name of the show was, but I interviewed Aitor Basari from Spy Monkey a few months ago on Clown-versation, and we were talking about this, and it's the most extended death scene I think I've ever seen. They played that scene from Romeo and Juliet, and it's just beautifully kind of extended and played.
Well, Decroux used to talk all the time about extrapolation, and when you use the word extended, literally that's what extrapolation is. And the further you extrapolate, the less something looks like what it actually is. And as it continues to extrapolate, it loses all of the narrative, and it goes more and more towards the very, very kernel of what the thing is about.
Yes. So the more it goes away from it, the more it comes back to to it in some way.
Yeah.
And Clown does that through the absurdity in particular.
Yeah.
Pointing out
and the
truth of life that is absurd and contradictory.
And ununderstandable. The whole, this universe that we're in, I don't understand it. I live in it. and I feel lucky to be here. And we spend our lives trying to define something that is undefinable.
I know. I love that beauty of that absurdity.
Mm.
So many more comments and interesting questions here. Oh, Nick has an interesting question. I think relating back to when you were mentioning at the very beginning about corporeal mime giving you this means of delivery. He says, does that translate into your daily life, articulating emotions to show your engagement?
Oh, it totally changes my life. It's funny because my life also changes my art. My art also changes my life. So the curriculum that I teach right now here and taught also at Brown, the first year is articulation, second year is partnering, and the third year is creating new work. And when you go back to that first year, articulation, I mean, it's how we get what we want, being articulate. When we are articulate, people at least know what we want. They don't necessarily give it to us, but then we can articulate a series of steps that get us what we want or what we need or what we dream of. And so, yeah, the whole idea of delivery system is to be articulate. You know, if the mailman takes my piece of mail and delivers it to my neighbor, that is not an articulate delivery. It is a very unarticulate delivery. And when it comes to me, it's a very articulate delivery. So
in the sense that it's correct, it's accurate.
It's useful. It's useful. I think that I sort of don't define things anymore by right or wrong or good and bad, because all you have to do is ask the Palestinians what's right and what's wrong, and then you ask the Israelis what's right and what's wrong. You're going to get two radically different answers that are both extremely heartfelt and both true from the cultures that they come from. When we start defining things more by their usefulness or their consequence, now you're talking about something that everybody can pretty much agree on, the usefulness of it or the non-usefulness of it or the consequence of it. It's pretty easy to know what the consequence of things are going to be. And it's pretty hard to know if the person you're talking to thinks what you're saying is right or wrong, because that it's so incredibly subjective.
Yeah.
That's Nick Friedson, by the way. Nick,
yes.
It's great to see you.
So I don't know if so you were speaking about articulation being the first year, and then you mentioned that partnering was the second year, and I'm curious, would you tell us a little more about this curriculum you created at Brown, and now you're teaching at Santa Barbara? What does the partnering year look like, and then what happens after that?
So partnering is a very interesting thing. I think when we think of partnering, our initial response is two people, that you're going to partner with another person, and that's perfectly logical. And you can partner with an object, so that all of a sudden this pen is my partner, and my listening to my partner becomes incredibly important, because of course I could manipulate the partner, but my wife is here hanging laundry right next to me. She's my partner. If I try to manipulate my partner's not going to be happy, because they are going to feel manipulated. We in the theater often use inanimate objects. And if we try to manipulate them, they too will not be very respondent to my manipulation. If I listen, however, to them, they will teach me what they know how to do. And all of a sudden, the partnership becomes much more rich because we are both collaborators in it rather than one, the colonizer, and the other the colonized, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I guess the secondary partnering from person to person becomes inanimate object, because in the theater we use so many of them, and space becomes a partner. And then the third partner is self. That you know, the French have an expression, va la gare pour voir si j'y suis. If somebody's bothering you, you tell them, go to the train station and see if I'm there. which is it's an insult in French, because obviously if we're talking here and I tell you to go to the train station to see if I'm there, I'm not going to be there. But who is going to be there? You're going to be there. You are always going to be where you are, and or not. And so that partnership, which I think is the fundamental partnership that human beings, we talked about the absurdity of life. The most absurd thing on the planet is that the one partner who will always be there is sometimes the most uninvited partner that we know, and it is ourself. It's that voice that we have in the back of our mind that we cannot escape. And so I try to teach how to become friends, or at least to soften the critical voice of that partner, that of self. And so that's year 2. It gets pretty acting. I think people who look at actor training or watch the work that we do think that we're not working hard. It is a labor of true love, the craft of the actor, the craft of the clown, the craft of anybody who is a theater maker, because you have to study these things and you have to practice these things 24/7. We talked about life and art and life. It's 24/7. Everybody else gets to put their work down at 5 p.m. and go home and have a drink. We never get to shut the door. We leave the work and it's still there. And we take our instrument home with us and we're still living in it. And we have to be in that instrument 24/7. And we have to use that instrument 24/7. And so the third year of the curriculum, just to go back to the subject, is creating new work. Because had Shakespeare been happy with the Greeks, we wouldn't have had Shakespeare. And had Harold Pinter been happy with Shakespeare, we wouldn't have had Harold Pinter. And tomorrow, we need Nick Friedson to be the new playwright on the block.
Come on, Nick.
Huh?
Come on, Nick.
Go, Nick. Well, Nick is a playwright as well as a wonderful actor. And I'm sure there are other playwrights out there.
So making work is really the thing that the sort of big area I'd like to come on to in a minute, Daniel, like how you go about making work with people. If you're just joining us, folks, welcome. Please subscribe, like the video, and share it with your friends. And also comment and chat. There's some wonderful comments and questions going on in the chat at the moment. So we've got about 15 minutes left here with Daniel. The time is going quickly. So if there's a burning question you have for him, then throw it into the chat. I will just look to see what we have. Well, Nick again says, could you ask Daniel about the use of objects and perpendicularity in theater and clown?
So objects have will, and just the same as people have will. And perpendicularity is the whole, it goes back to mime and pantomime. In pantomime, it is a very parallel world that I use a banana to create banana and probably to have the peel fall on the ground and slip on it, because those are very parallel ideas. In corporeal mime and in the extrapolation of corporeal mime into the larger world of theater, perpendicularity becomes the whole object that we get to metaphor in perpendicularity. When I say, this morning I found gold, by virtue of Clown-versation, that's a metaphor. I didn't actually find gold. I found you and your audience and this venue. And that's very perpendicular, if you will, that I found gold is not at all, I found a new venue, I found a new friend, I found a new audience, I found gold. And
it's kind of it's like incongruous in a way. It's like going off in a different direction.
And yet, as you put it, the further away you go, the closer you're getting to that kernel again. I have found gold because gold is valuable by its rarity. You are valuable by your rarity. As I mentioned before we started this, you're the first clown I know with a PhD. and so that in many ways is perpendicular. That if we, if you were working at Barnum and Bailey, I think the last thing they would put on their publicity is he's got a PhD. That's not what they would point at.
Unless it was considered like a freak show.
Perpendicular. It would be perpendicular. And so
that's absolutely fascinating. I love this way of thinking. I mean, all art, right, is not the thing that it's representing in that sense. So all art is perpendicular. But as you say, it's kind of there's something about it that we recognize somehow as more truthful than the reality. So it feels like it's getting at something deeper and more essential than our everyday experience sort of feels like. Because everyday experience often feels untruthful, perhaps, or sort of mundane, repetitive. And it's what Brecht called the punctum, right? This thing that kind of like, oh, a clown with a PhD? It sort of like jumps out of this mass of undistinguishable everyday experience and leads to a sort of an insight or a noticing of something different.
I often tell my students, this is going to sound hard to understand, but in fact, I'll repeat it. If you are doing what you are doing to do what you are doing, you're wasting our time. If, on the other hand, you are doing what you are doing to get you somewhere else, you may be making theater. That if you are moving the pen to move the pen, you're a pen mover. If you are moving the pen to get you somewhere else, it becomes very obvious, I would imagine, that I'm not really in love with the pen. But if I do this, that somehow I am in love. It's not with the pen, but the pen is there for good cause. But neither as a pen nor object of love, but as partner to help express idea. And so it goes back to narrative as compared to idea. Narrative is the little story, Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And idea is the kernel.
It's interesting. I often say when I'm teaching clown that the story or the action is really an excuse to be there. So the point of clown is to be there, with the audience, and it's in this kind of magical moment of connection that happens, which is very unique to clown. I think this kind of feeling of there being like a string or a thread that's connecting me with the audience, and that's the whole point of it. All the action and objects and stuff is just kind of a pretext to be there, to have this.
And be with a capital B.
Yeah.
To be, not, and it's interesting, in English, they call the verb to be a passive verb. And it's not. It's a very active verb. You have to actively be, not just because you're there, but because you're there. And being there, as the clown is, there's true communication back and forth between the audience and the clown.
Yeah.
It's a conversation, or a clown-versation, as some people.
It's a conversation. Exactly. You just put your finger on why I'm doing this whole thing, Daniel.
That's good. That's good.
It's connection, right?
It's connection. It's partnership.
Yeah. Beautiful. So when you're making a show, whether it be your own or with somebody else, can you let us into a little bit of the process? Like, how do you go about, what does it look like in the room when you first start working? How do you get things moving? What are you looking for?
Well, I get things moving. That's so interesting that you put it that way. We don't sit down at the table and discuss what we want to do. We stand up and we jump into the river, if you will. We start playing. And true play, my buddy Ray Krieg, when I was a little boy, my best friend was Ray. And when Ray would come over to the house, we wouldn't decide to play a spaceship or play Parcheesi. We just played. As soon as we'd run out the door, and we were on a different planet. And then 2 seconds later, we were swimming in the ocean in my backyard, which wasn't the ocean. It was the grass in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But we were playing. And when I'm creating a play, practice laughing at yourself, which is a line that I learned from Jeff Smithson, who's also watching from Boston, and is a dear, dear, lovely human being. When you're practicing laughing at yourself, you make discoveries. And those discoveries become the foundation of whatever we're going to create. Sometimes I'm brought in to direct a script that already exists. But most of the time, when people use me towards my strengths, we go in to devise something brand new. And we don't start with the narrative. What story are we going to tell? Because all we'll do is tell that story. And we've gone from the sublime to the to the boring.
Mm.
Decroux used to say we have to do extraordinary things with unextraordinary means rather than do unextraordinary things with extraordinary means. And so we start by moving. We walk into the studio and we start by moving. And somebody notices that the person over there just did something that made them giggle. And we stop the whole room and we all say, can you play again and find that moment? And they do, or they can't. But in trying to, they discover something else. And we start with that time. My wife, this cap was crocheted by my wife. And if you look really closely, right in the middle of it, there's a knot right here.
Mm-hmm.
That first knot is what the entire hat is connected to. That every loop that she makes in her crochet is connected to that original knot, even if it's distanced by several inches. And so we find that first knot, and then we connect something to that knot, and then we connect something else to that knot, and then we connect something else to that knot, and that's how we build. You know, when we say playwright, it's not written W-R-I-T-E. It's W-R-I-G-H-T, right?
Yeah.
And what does it mean to write? It means to build. That we are building a play. We're not sitting trying to do something for someone who is standing. We are standing trying to build something for someone who will be standing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the audience sits. And we go from the physical world to the metaphysical world. And that ping pong game between those two worlds is what our evening at the theater becomes.
To build. I love that. I feel that there is a lot more to talk about, Daniel, but we're coming to the end of our hour, and this feels like a good note to finish on, this idea of building something together. Because it's sometimes, and I love that you are really motivated and inspired by the idea of a theater for today. And because it so often feels to me, like with clowning, that there's a kind of a way in which sometimes theater doesn't feel relevant anymore, and that we're trying to sort of reinvent something that is of the past. And is it worth it, or should we just kind of move into, you know, technology or modern versions of theater? But coming back to the body and to movement and to play, and this beautiful metaphor again, this really reminds me of something that Ronlin said once, actually. The knot, I can't remember what it was he said, but it made me think of him when you said that, Ronlin Foreman, about community. And it's about the knot, right? What are we all connecting to, and how can theater be part of that connecting of us?
Well, that's what you know, we're on this planet for a very short period of time, and if we don't use it to connect, then we're using it to disconnect, and that's not an idea. that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, Daniel, it's been really inspirational talking to you. Thank you so much. I can see all the gratitude and thanks that's coming through in the chat as well. Todd says, Daniel speaks so full. I love thinking on these words. David says, thank you very much. This is gold. Well, it's not really gold, but I know what you mean. And,
if people want my website, may I give my website on your show?
Please.
poeticdynamics.com. That's poeticdynamics, plural.com.
And put that into the chat as well. Poeticdynamics.com. There you go.
Yes.
I think I haven't discovered that site yet. Daniel, I've just found other sites of yours, so that is wonderful.
It seriously needs updating. but it's there, and I promise I will update it. I won't. My buddy Jeff Matthias, who I think is probably watching also, will update it with me, because
awesome.
he's my webmaster.
Go Jeff. Yes, we all need those people.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm not technically inclined at all.
Well, it's really been a joy talking to you, Daniel. I hope you'll come back and do this again with me another time, and we can, kind of carry on where we left off.
That'd be exciting. It was such a treat to meet you, Barnaby. I had no idea who you are, and now I'm going to watch your podcast regularly.
Yay. And speaking of which, we have next week, I don't know if you know him, Chris Lynham. He's a wonderful British eccentric, I would call him, eccentric clown performer who's very experienced on the kind of cabaret circuit in the UK and in Europe. And Chris is an amazing, very outrageous out there sort of performer. So looking forward to talking to him. And after Christmas, we have some very cool people coming up. Jos Huben is going to be on in January. And several other hospital clowns we have coming on as well after Christmas. So I hope you'll watch and tune in for those. And thank you everyone for joining and watching today. It's been wonderful interaction, wonderful questions. Thank you so much. And one last time, please hit that subscribe button before you leave the video so that you always get the updates about Clown Spirit stuff. Check out my website as well, which is clown-spirit.com. There's lots of free resources, information about programs and courses I have, including my membership program, which is called Clown for Life. And of course, check out I think there's about 50 of these Clown-versations at the Clown Spirit YouTube channel, going back a year and a half now. So once again, thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for joining in today. We'll see you again next week for another Clown-versation.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.